Hey, Rob here. Apologies on the delay on this one. I first spoke with David Heatley in late January. It seems like we've recorded enough conversations that month to cover most of the year, being that we distribute every 2 weeks via their team media. With a few breaks here and there, we now find ourselves at the end of July. So I owe you, dear listeners and followers, the presentation of these unique special conversations in a timely manner. So, David Heatley, a native New Yorker, renowned cartoonist, animator, musician, author, and I dive deep into the craft of pursuing multiple creative interests, the power of cartoon to critique society, and meeting his prolific poetic wife. And of course, his graphic memoir, Qualification, in which he puts all of his insecurities about his childhood, his sexually repressed alcoholic father, and his addiction to any and all types of anonymous groups out there for public scrutiny. So please enjoy conversation number 62, filled with both awesomeness and realness, along with the in between. Your hosts are L. And of course, music by Walter ETC, and video produced by artist Kevin Gilmore. Thank you. Hey, David. Well, once again, thank you for joining me on Uncontaminated Sound. I guess the logical question, for me at least, is really how did you kick off your career in illustration? I guess, and how did the journey begin?
Yeah, I mean, you could go all the way back to childhood in terms of my drawing, but I would say I got more serious about it in college, studying painting, and then I discovered, kind of alternative comic books, and was just studying that and copying my favorite artists, as a lot of cartoonists do, and sort of found my own style slowly. And then I think, through self-publishing, making zines in the 90s and mailing them to friends and then selling them at comic book stores, slowly getting known by other cartoonists, having them open doors for me. That's always been my strategy, is just to kind of befriend people from a genuine place of liking their work, and then but that does often seem to help you in your career too, even though I'm not trying for that. So yeah, I'd say like a few key cartoonists like really opened some doors for me, and got me into anthologies, and then into some newspapers and stuff like that, and it kind of took off from there.
Well, going back to more of a childhood, were you like influenced by any like cartoons on TV? Were you reading any specific comics? Visually, what was just what were you digesting at that time?
Sure. Yeah, as a real little kid, I mean, it was Dr. Seuss and Richard Scarry, and then there was a really really terrible newspaper comic strip called Andy Cap, which was like this, guy basically beating his wife and an alcoholic. So I don't know why I was so drawn to that as a little kid.
Yeah.
That tells you something about my family. But yeah, the style of that though really spoke to me, and I kind of would copy that cartoon. And then there was there was stuff like just like the Muppets were really huge to me. So the simplicity of those character designs, all of that was kind of seeping in. And I'd say, the 70s, I was born in 74, so the 70s into the early 80s, there was just a lot of really great, wildly visual, kind of psychedelic television at the time. And I drank that all up, basically.
And now you originally just went to college for more painting and film, is that correct? Or
yeah, that's right.
Cool. But then when did you start kind of taking illustration seriously? Was that at the time as well, or when did that pick up?
Yeah, I was definitely like kind of falling in love with comics around that time, and drawing on my own kind of. I feel like kind of a self-taught cartoonist, even though I have some drawing class experience. But yeah, my drawing teachers were never like super supportive of that, and they didn't really get it. So it was kind of its own pursuit. I guess I would say the one great thing that came out of art school was I did this drawing exercise of blindfolding myself and just drawing what would come to me. And the images, a lot of them were kind of closer to the way I used to draw as a kid. So that was kind of a cool bridge back to that original drawing style I had. And that once I kind of rediscovered that, I'd say, everything sort of clicked and my comics started looking like that. And then as I got illustration work, I was kind of drawing from that more naive young place in me, and it felt more authentic.
Hmm. And at that time, I was reading your wife's bio as well. Did you meet in college as well, university, or?
We actually met in high school, my wife and I. Yeah.
Oh wow! Wow.
She was my senior year. She went off to college, but we had kind of a long distance romance, and then I followed her to Oberlin, and we were there for 2 years, and we broke up for a couple of years, and then she kind of followed me out to California when I went to art school, and we've been together since then. Yeah.
Now, how has it? Oh, I guess has she been a big? I mean, has she balanced you out in your work and really helped you kind of, I guess, work in tandem? Have you both worked in tandem, I guess, and helped, which also kind of helped propel your professional creative journey?
I mean, I'd say balance is a good word for what she's done to my life in general. So yeah, she's balanced out my more mercurial, crazy tendencies. She's a very kind of steady, stable person. She's a novelist and she's written poetry too. And yeah, I mean, we have very different work. She has a very kind of quiet, beautiful, really distilled kind of voice in her writing. And mine is a bit more brash and kind of a little bit rude and even obnoxious sometimes. And so, yeah, I'd say, yeah, we've definitely probably influenced each other a little bit, but mostly just supported each other in what we do and kind of, read each other's work and give notes and stuff like that sometimes. Yeah.
Now, how long did it take to find your true like voice, I guess, illustration wise and writing wise? Like, for me, like I found art later on, so I'm still struggling to find my voice now, but visually and and also in my writings. But for yourself, how long did it take to hone that and then start getting assignments and stuff like that?
Yeah, I guess I would say, once I had that sort of breakthrough with drawing in a way that felt authentically me, again, kind of more from the childlike part of myself, I did get a little illustration job at a free weekly. I mean, I don't know if it was like $50 or something per assignment. It was not a lot of money, but I would recommend that, even if it's like doing something for a friend, like just having some structure, having some kind of regular thing you need to do. And then I think you find your style. There's like a trial by fire that happens. Like you have to turn in something each week. So, it kind of forces you to make some quicker decisions and you get out of your head a little bit more. And I think that probably helps starting to get actual assignments from newspapers and stuff.
Yeah, having that set deadline every week and constantly producing, like you said. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
In terms of writing, I guess I would say, when I started realizing I wanted to write comics, I realized that I hadn't thought of this as writing, but I had been keeping a journal for years and years, just like not worrying about the craft of it, just literally documenting my thoughts and dreams and feelings and stuff. And I realized this was all writing that I could use. And it was actually in its raw form. There was some kind of beauty to it already. And I realized like a lot of cartoonists were doing comics about their dreams, and I already had all these dreams well documented, and they were really crazy and violent and weird. And I just thought, okay, this is some material I could use. And that's really where it started for me, is drawing my dreams.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, that's I've always written myself in notebooks upon notebooks and books behind me, and just crazy. And right now I'm trying to and every morning since I got a typewriter last year, I just every morning just typing away, just stream of consciousness stuff. But now I'm like, I basically have like a manuscript of like stream of consciousness stuff, and I'm like, what do I do with this?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been experimenting with more cut-up technique visually, like in regards to like burrows, and then like with the visual element, kind of like taking the chopped up and screwed phrases and kind of pasting them on like some oil and different materials and seeing the outcome of that, which looked pretty cool. And then I lost that kind of discipline of doing it every day. And like,
No, yeah, that's great. Those kind of like random combinations of images. I think that's a great way to, trick yourself into making things, and meaning comes out of that without you necessarily planning it, which is usually the best way for what you're trying to say to come through, is if you're not thinking too hard and you're not like pushing an agenda, you're just sort of playing and experimenting. So that sounds cool.
Yeah, like kind of just tapping into the subconscious. And then
Yes.
which I've been bad at, is having that time to review the material and then like, oh, I could build an idea or concept of this phrase or this one word, or just like a journal entry, correct? And I just find the whole process fascinating of like a brain dump and just free associations and just without any limitations, being free, even like painting, like in the background. That's just me just kind of playing around. I'm just kind of just always experimenting and stuff like that myself. But
yeah,
how about yourself? I know with the now established career in illustration and also writing and actually music as well. Do you still often experiment, or do you have that set kind of language? You know what to do. Go about it more in a let's get to work attitude. Or
yeah, no, I would say I still do experiment for sure. And one thing that's kind of fun is that my daughter's my daughter's now 17, but she's always been someone who kind of pushes me to draw with her, and will kind of give me an assignment like, let's both draw like a landscape based on this photo, or let's both just use these new color pencils I got and see what comes out. And she's very good at just drawing for the pleasure of it and for the experiment. So just recently she did this again with me. We got some paints out on the table, and I just started drawing just to feel the pleasure of the brush moving around the page, and going with where it took me, and not having any set goal in mind. And it is wonderful. It's a really freeing, great feeling. And I do that with music too. I mean, I definitely each song I demo by myself. I'm always trying to push the envelope, and you know if I don't really know piano, but like trying to figure out a keyboard line that would go with something. Or I've never been great at soloing on the guitar. I play chords mostly, but pushing myself to try and learn, like a melodic line and play that on the guitar. Just there's always ways to do experimenting, even when you do have a project you're trying to finish, like that you can inject some experimental energy into parts of it.
yeah. I feel like with the experimental process, you can learn a new process and apply it to your already established process as well.
Yeah, I'd
And
say
then
that's
with that, you constantly evolve, right? No, instead of stay stagnant and
for
kinda,
sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the probably the main thing I got from going to San Francisco Art Institute is, I studied experimental film, so literally there's the word, but it's people a lot of times personal one-person cinema, handheld cameras. And what that school taught me more than anything was just how to make art without any assignments, or without any money, even just how to have a life of making art, and how to try things and how to play. So that was, that's something I've definitely leaned on since leaving school. It was a great education in that way.
yeah. Just like being free without restrictions is kind of, it's freeing, and just you allow the mind to kind of wander and discover and play, etc. I was curious, I guess, like regarding illustration again in general. I guess, why is it so potent comparatively to any other, like say photography in journalism, or why is it so important? Well, actually, why is it so potent in say lampooning and criticizing society with illustrations comparatively, people take photographs literally in publications and such, but with illustration, I feel like you have more leeway to critique our politicians, our society. What do you think that is? Have you ever thought about that?
Sure. I mean, I'm not a political cartoonist, but I do think there's something inherent to cartoons that are disarming, and they kind of like get past people's defenses in a way that other kind of imagery you hang on the surface a little bit more. But I think cartoons like almost penetrate straight into the mind, and you read them so instantly that the meaning can kind of take hold quicker. And it's also a lot of times they're kind of cute and funny, and you're charmed by them, and then that's a way of kind of like a Trojan horse getting in there and getting the meaning without you defending yourself. And then I think the last reason, at least the comics I draw are just kind of personal about my life and again, thoughts, feelings, dreams. But I think the kind of comics I love are really there's a direct connection between the artist's hand and what you're reading. It's like from their mind to their hand to the paper to your eyes to your brain. It's just such a direct connection to another person. And it's the drawings are as personal as handwriting, and I just think there's a lot of beauty in that.
It's really unique to the illustrator and their unique observations of the world at hand. It seems like,
yeah, for sure.
Can you tell me, talk a bit about your first book? Was that your first book, My Brain is Hanging Upside Down? Or
yeah, that was my first book.
Oh, can you talk about that? Like, what kind of started that process? Of why did you, like, what kicked off that process? Like, did you just like at the time, like, I want to create a book, or like, what really inspired you to really create such a project initially?
Yeah, it was more like I was doing those dream comics, and then I was doing I did these portrait comics. I did a portrait of my father and a portrait of my mother in comic book form, or in comic strip form. And it was almost like I thought of it almost like as a cubist portrait, that like each strip was like another facet or another angle of my parents, and you would kind of add the strips up in your head and make a complete person when you were done reading it. So that was another thing I was playing with, and these were just short pieces I was doing on their own and just putting into different journals or anthologies I was getting invited to. So it was more like I had a collection of shorter things, and then I met someone at a publisher, and he said, "Are you working on a book?" And I was like, "I guess this could be a book," And then as I kept working on it, I had this comic strip I was drawing about kind of my whole sex life, my sexual history going back to childhood up through marriage, and I had a strip I was working on about race and kind of like my own racism and my experience of what goes on in my head around Black people, and trying to really expose that. So yeah, that all those pieces then I think became a book in my head, and I did a little bit of massaging to kind of make them work together, but mostly it is kind of like I think of that book as like almost like 5 different people drew it, because I drew it over the course of 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an anthology of a few different artists.
Yeah. Well, can you talk a bit about like actually diving into your childhood and then putting that into a book form and out into the open? Like, was that a hard process to go through? Like diving back into the childhood, maybe traumas, maybe not. Then
trauma's a good word.
and then putting it out there to the world, like to the vast world of readers or viewership. And what was that feeling like? How did you break past any, like, I guess, possibly limitations from your own self, like saying, I don't want to let this out, but this would be strengthening the book.
I guess it's a little bit like I have an exhibitionist streak in me, and I seem to be like missing that part of my brain that would make me ashamed or afraid to share something. And I've always been drawn to artists who like 100% go for broke and just put themselves so vulnerably into their work, whether it's film or comics or musicians. So, I'm working in a lineage. It's not like I came up with this on my own, but also, it's a bit like asking someone who does striptease, like, how did you get to be so, open with your body? It's like, they're probably just like, I was born like that. I just like to run around naked. It's a bit like that. I don't know that I can credit myself as having pulled something off. It's like my nature. I just tend to want to like share really vulnerably, and I don't seem to be too ashamed about it.
Yeah, I don't know. It makes total sense. It's not. I was just curious, I guess, because there's like, I kind of wonder if it's more natural to others, for others to kind of share like yourself. For me, it's like it's a struggle to pull things out of me. So it's like but then I do want to, but then it's like I have to kind of have just a pushback from my like subconscious, like no,
Sure.
But I know where that stems from, and generally from childhood,
Yeah. Well,
as usual.
I will say, I mean, there was stuff that I didn't put into that first book, and it wasn't until later because I just thought, okay, I'm revealing absolutely everything about myself, and then I realized once it was published, like, no, there's several layers I haven't really tapped into yet, and that stuff made it into my second book. So yeah, and then even since the second book, there's other things. I mean, there's always layers to peel away and see what's even deeper down.
Yeah, no, totally. Also, were you still in Queens? Is that correct?
Yeah,
Eh,
in Queens.
Can I assume you were a Ramones fan?
Oh
Due
yeah.
to the title, and then also just being from, or not from Queens initially, but living there.
Yeah, no, big time. They're important band to me for sure.
Yeah. And they've had some interesting illustrative covers too, right? I believe.
Yeah. There's definitely a comic books. Well, there's like a comic book rock and roll connection going back forever, but then also Ramon specifically.
And then with actually now we're going forward a bit, like your latest book, Qualifications, correct? Or Qualification. You dive deeper into like your family history, but then you talk about the 12-step programs. And can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. I'll talk about anything you want to talk about. Yeah, I would say that in some ways that's the thing I wasn't really talking about in the first book, which is that, as I was wrapping up my first book and editing it, I was like very much a true believer, and I was going to like 3 or 4 different 12-step programs, kind of fully convinced that I was a hopeless addict, and that if I didn't have a meeting every day, I would go insane, and that I was sort of protecting my family from my, monstrosity by going to these rooms. And this was pushed on me since childhood, like since I was a teen. Both my parents were big time 12-steppers. They tend to pathologize all my behavior and think of it as addiction, and that I needed to be in program. So it wasn't until I turned 30 that I was in a really vulnerable state, and I think super susceptible to my mom pushing it on me. And I just said, okay, fine, I'll try it. And I found myself really sucked into it. And I found myself, I really got high off the meetings, to be honest. It was just like a really wonderful feeling to be heard and to feel a part of this group. And it's a very powerful thing to say, hi, my name's David, and then this room echoes, hi, David. It's like the voice of God responding to you. And I don't want to like make fun of it too much. I know people find these programs and it saves their life, and it works for them. In my case, it was kind of the wrong thing for me. It started to like really hurt my marriage, and again, kind of became its own addiction for me. I kind of like kept thinking I needed more and more programs, and I just went more and more often, and it kind of made me a little crazier. And so this book is just reckoning with that. Is like, how do I tell this story of what happened here?
And that was all different programs, correct? Like not just AA, but also like I've seen like Sex Anonymous, or et cetera,
Oh
too.
yeah, yeah. It was Debtors Anonymous. It was like a money program because I was chronically having trouble with money.
Yeah.
And then it was Al-Anon, which is like, detaching from the crazy addicts in your own life. And I certainly have some of those in my family. And then Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous was I was convinced I was some kind of sex addict because I, jerked off a normal amount basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then, but I also did have these like obsessive crushes all the time, and that's kind of what really brought me in. I was like felt blown around like a leaf in the wind with a crush on this girl and that girl and that girl. Like, so it's not like there wasn't stuff wrong and that I needed some help with, but yeah, these places didn't ultimately uh, help me all that much. And then yeah, I wound up this is the craziest part. I went to like Overeaters Anonymous too, and then I wound up in AA by the end because I just told myself, well, I guess this is the first program and it's the most potent program. I need the purest, most uncut, drug. But also, I just convinced myself, like, well, I have an alcoholic dad, so I have alcoholic thinking, and I just need to go to AA. And my wife at that point was like, but you don't drink. This is absolutely insane. What are you doing going to AA? And I'd go to these meetings and go, hi, I'm David, I'm an alcoholic. And then in my head, I'd go, what are you doing here? No, you're not.
Yeah.
But I just kept going anyway.
I feel like it sounds like you're kind of just maybe subconsciously, it sounds like you're kind of doing some research or field research too. I
Yeah.
just maybe subconsciously, but also it's a kind of funny irony that, you know, addiction meetings are addicting themselves, It just
Yeah.
like, I've gone through a few meetings of like, I've had to deal with like post concussion stuff. So I've been going through like group meetings, and my
Mhm.
cousin used to he still goes to AA back in Boston. And I
Yeah.
went to one time and I was like, I don't like the vibe here, like it was a bit too religiously, like, but
Mhm.
I see where
Yeah.
the support comes in for serious addicts, but
Mhm. Mhm.
I was like, not for me. Like, but
Mhm.
I too, though, am like, I've had like bouts of like where I've drank too much myself, and I'm like, am I an alcoholic? Because like I know my grandfather was an alcoholic, and then you
Mhm.
get into that
Mhm.
train of thought, and you're like, oh, do I need help?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
so I could see where like all those going to all those meetings could like maybe influence you and saying maybe I do, but and then when people are just giving you support back, not
Yeah.
questioning your addiction, then it's like, oh, there's no pushback and
Oh
saying
yeah.
you're
No,
not an addict.
they
But
all say no. They all say you belong here with us, and no one's gonna say like, what are you doing here? Get out of here. They want you there. So yeah, and I found like a subtle pressure to kind of make my story worse and worse in my head, and so I could share it and make it seem like I had, climbed out of the depths like everyone else had, and I don't know. The other thing is, yeah, I think you're right. There's like a religious vibe, and I think at its base, the reason why I kind of parted ways was because I think at its base, it is sort of a sin-based ideology, which is that they see alcoholism as a spiritual disease. Like, first of all, what the hell does that even mean?
yeah, yeah,
But you're basically you're born with this blot on your soul that will never be removed, and your only hope is if you come here with us and you spend a day, and then tomorrow you might die anyway, or like just the whole thing. I believe in people getting better. I believe in psychology and therapy and like, mastering your problems and growing. I don't really believe that you're static, you're like sinful forever and in a
yeah.
static kind of state. So yeah. Again, there's a lot of good stuff. I mean, I've heard a lot of wonderful shares. I got a lot of folk wisdom from people. There was an amazing self-organizing democratic principle at work. I mean, there's no like crazy cult leader or anything. It really was an amazing self-organizing group and rotating leadership positions. So there's a lot that was good,
Hmm.
but yeah, plenty that was a little bit crazy making.
Yeah, it sounds like in the end, though, it should be in reality, it's up to the individual to want to change. the behaviors, and it's very changeable if you go to more psychology based like CBT stuff and behavioral therapy, comparatively just I feel like just basing it on, oh well, you know, having codependency on a group constantly. I mean, I don't mind, you know, groups, you know, sprinkled here and there, but I've always liked to be an independent thinker myself. And I've been very cautious of joining any groups. Maybe, you know, it's like I've been to them and then I'm like, no, everybody, like, it's not a true democracy. It's like people's opinions are shot down by stronger voices. And it's like, no, this is what's wrong with all bureaucracies. You know? So anything I've seen and pretended to be a genuine organization, it's same thing, this hierarchy, and you know, it's and in the end, it's still just a group of humans, you know. So, well, I which I would love. I got to dive deeper into your book. Like I'd love to dive. That not is it's really piquing my interest, and
Oh, good.
I think you've sold me on a book now. But
cool.
Where was I guess now bringing to current times and times of COVID. What have has it drastically affected your work? Obviously, as an illustrator, you generally isolated in your workspace alone anyway, so it's not like the musicians I've spoken to, you know, with live performances and trying to tour, everything's been chaotic on that note. But actually, I forgot to ask about your music too, by the way. Sorry if I just went back, but
let's talk about the music.
When do you start picking up an instrument, and when did you really want to kind of pursue that creative aspect to yourself as well?
Yeah, I think it was really around high school. I got my first guitar, and you know, music has always been incredibly important to me, and kind of like a lifesaver, a lifeline. And you know, when I discovered kind of the weirder bands back in middle school, I felt less alone, and like a lot of people. And I think it was you know, the early 90s, like East Village, New York City anti-folk scene, especially bands like King Missile and Dog Bowl. Those were like my idols. And I think because of their approach was just very raw and rough and kind of punk, but not so like, you know, rigid and didactic with what the sounds could be. So there's like, you know, acoustic guitars and spoken poetry, but it had like an attitude, and it felt very like rough and kind of tossed off sometimes. And I felt like that gave me permission, like, oh, I could write a song like this. And so yeah, my friend and I formed a band, and we just like wrote these kind of crazy stoner poetry songs and like recorded 4-track demos of them all. And you know, before long we sent them off to Kramer at Shimmy Disc, who put out these bands that we loved, and he liked it, and he was like, yeah, let's make an album. So like, you know, when I was 17, we're like going to this legendary studio, Noise, New Jersey, and like actually recording our songs onto 2-inch tape. And you know, and they, you know, eventually, maybe a year later or something, a CD came out, and it was in Tower Records. Like it was a pretty heady beginning, you know. It's pretty soon after I was writing my first songs, like I had a CD out like a year later or something. It was kind of amazing.
Yeah. Now, sorry, I just want actually I see on your site right now you have a new album coming out February. Yeah, wow, it's already February. 11th. 2/2. I generally release this every 2 weeks, so it could be a few weeks after the release. But can you speak about the new album a bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's funny you were asking about like, has my life been affected by COVID and the lockdown? And I would say I tend to cycle between doing like a big cartoon comics project and a big music project. So it had, you know, I'd worked on Qualification, finished that, and I found my music kind of like coming back to me, and really songs wanting to be written. And so the beginning of lockdown, like I just had all these songs that, you know, I had little fragments of them, and some of them were coming in my dreams, or just, you know, while I was walking to the studio or something. So yeah, I spent the first like few months of quarantine just like coming to my studio and like demoing these songs. And I found that when I opened up my song writing book and took out my guitar, they just came really quickly. Some of them I wrote in like 5 minutes, you know. And so those are the songs that kind of make up this album. I'd say most of them, yeah, I mean, a few of them were like older songs I'd never recorded, but most of them were written during quarantine and with no intention of what I was going to do with it. I just demoed it in my studio and kind of put it on the shelf. And then I was corresponding with Mark Bingham down in Louisiana, who's you know, originally based in New Orleans. And you know, I just was a big fan of some records he had produced and was writing him about that. And I said, here's some stuff I've been writing recently, you know, I don't know if you're into it, but I'd love to work with you someday. And you know, to my surprise, he really liked them. He said, yeah, let's do some of these. And so then it was just about getting myself down to Louisiana and getting the time, organizing the time with my wife that I could go do that. And it was an incredible, like, kind of life-changing experience. I'm just super happy with how the songs came out, and the musicians that Mark pulled together. And it was just really joyful. And yeah, I don't think my music's ever been this clear or this in this kind of fully formed state the way, you know, Mark has helped me to do. Yeah.
Now, what kind of matured? Did both music and illustration mature at the same time? At, you know, throughout your
Yeah.
path, or did, I assume, more illustration took control at times, and then
Yeah.
placed music aside for a bit, and then?
Yeah. That's a really good question, actually. I mean, I remember I had basically kind of stopped doing music for like 10 years when my first book came out. And I had just kind of given myself completely to comics and illustration. And so, yeah, there was a pretty big learning curve. And when the book came out, I feel like I had reached a certain level of competency and had a voice, and I kind of knew how to draw the things I wanted to do. And then just at that moment when the book came out, like all this fire kind of burned in me, like, what about music? And then I wanted to do some music, and I found it was not at the same level. Like the music had not matured. It was like I was still in high school musically.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I remember feeling this disappointment because it had taken me 10 years to really get my voice around comics. And when I started writing songs again, I just thought, oh man, is it going to take 10 years to like find my voice in music? That was so disappointing to think about. And lo and behold, like it really did. I feel like I feel very clear now on what I want to say in music, and I feel some competency on how to do it. But it's taken probably 12 years since then that you know, I feel like I'm writing songs I'm really proud of now, and they're well constructed, and you know.
Now, what is it that you want to say with your music? And particularly with the new album, what are you communicating in this new album?
So the album's called Life Our Own Way, and I think of it as kind of like, I mean, it's the same with my comics, but I'm kind of planting a flag in a way for, you know, staying innocent in the world in the face of all these forces that want to kind of drag us down and make us cynical. So it's keeping your innocence, and, you know, planting a flag for artists, basically a rallying cry for artists. Like, yeah, you can live your life the way you want to design it, even though we live in this horrible, oppressive world. Like, you know, you can carve out a little space for you and your fellow artists and create. And, you know, we need to, like, everyone needs to keep making art, because that's why life is worth living, in my opinion. So yeah, it's kind of a statement of that in a lot of ways. And there's a bunch of there's a bunch of different themes. So there's some songs that are like more the shadow side. You know, I'm very into Jungian, you know, therapy and different texts about Jung's theories, and there definitely is a lot of shadow work that I feel like I was doing with this album, kind of yeah, imagery and emotions that are kind of the darker side of my psyche. So yeah, I feel like it's a pretty, it's someone gets to spend an hour in my brain. That's kind of how I feel. You see the world through my eyes and how I feel about things, and I think it's a pretty wide variety of stories and emotion on the record.
Interesting. Can't wait to. Uh, oh, is it just digitally? Sorry, I was like, can't wait till it goes out in stores. It doesn't happen these days. You can just
Yeah.
launch digitally. So
Yeah.
where could we find it once February 11th comes around?
Yeah, it'll be everywhere online. Right now, the single is up. There's an animated video I drew. I actually drew 1,000 different drawings for this animated video that's up on YouTube now for Life Our Own Way.
Cool.
The single's up on Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube and everywhere. And then yeah, I have a second video that someone else is animating for me that comes out in a couple weeks, and then the full record should be out. To find it, just Google.
Yeah, that's all you need to do.
Yeah.
So, do you have plans to do hard copy or any vinyl? Vinyl is cool these days. Well, it's cool again.
Yeah. No, right now I don't. I'm kind of just hoping people hear it, and if it got some kind of following and there was people clamoring for vinyl, like sure I'll press it up. But I don't, I haven't had uh, that level of like a fan base yet for my music. So I'm just kind of starting to start small and see who can get interested in it.
Yeah, totally. And have you? I know it's hard these days to perform live, but have you performed live shows in the past or even recently, if outdoor, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I did about 5 years ago. I had a different band here in New York, and we did a series of EPs. They were called Angel Numbers. It was Angel Numbers 111, 222, and 333. And that band, we played quite a bit around New York City. We didn't really travel outside of New York, but maybe a dozen shows or something. And I love playing live. It's not super feasible for me in terms of my time or organizing the musicians. So again, if there was like some opportunity to play live or someone wanted me to do a show, I would pull something together, but it's not something I'm like focusing on at the moment.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I guess a kind of futuristic question, like where do you see, I guess, like illustration or your work progressing towards, and then also just the medium itself. You see illustration and comics and sticking around for the foreseeable future, or do you think it will adapt into some new form, which actually we kind of see now with NFTs, kind of metaverse, etc. But I'm kind of curious on the future outlook for your craft.
Yeah, I'd say I'm kind of pointing my career more towards animation and even TV. Right now, I'm working on a pitch with a co-writer and a producer in LA to pitch my book Qualification as an animated TV series, and so we're taking that out like in the next couple of months. And yeah, doing the music videos has been really satisfying because it's a way of marrying the two together, the songs I wrote and then all these drawings, and I'm directing it. And so yeah, I'd see more of that. I think I haven't thought about how I'm going to fit into the metaverse, but I think we will have moving images and music for quite a while, so I'll just keep doing videos for now.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think I do have a couple more books in me. I definitely need to take a couple of years off from drawing comics. I'm kind of burnt out, but I've been very much enjoying animating the drawings instead.
Yeah, no, it gives a different dimension. You start thinking about the movements and the interaction comparably to the 2D image.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is kind of why I started this series. It's where I was like, okay, I want to dive deeper into the artist, a crafts person who I was documenting with the lens, but you can't really tell the complexity. With an image, you can and you can't, and I just love having conversations. So,
Yeah,
I get that. You know, 2D images. You know, you get to a point where like I need to go deeper. You know, and at different levels. And
hmm
right in front of me, I have like just a brainstorming for myself. Like, how do I like create meta-human like portraits and or have self-generating portraitures or use
Mm,
AI or deep learning to kind of generate imagery as well. So I'm
that's
fascinated
cool.
in that space.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's on my like my many ideas in front of me. So we'll see if it's feasible. However, though, I do have a for years I was in like UX and tech in Boston
hmm
prior to just picking up and moving to Brooklyn and on a whim and found
hmm
the lens. But so I'm like now I'm fascinated with the NFTs, the metaverse, and AI, deep learning, etc. And then, but also just for the use of strictly creating art and seeing
Yeah.
how far AI can express,
hmm
and self teach itself, and just self replicate and express, But there's always one thing missing when I've seen like these avatars. It's
hmm
really you can tell they're still avatars because you can obviously tell it's lacking a bit of soul, and
hmm hmm
personality, and that's one
I
thing. If
agree with you.
researchers could, or an artist too, could just put themselves into the algorithms and into algorithmic DNA, and
hmm
and and then that'd be really interesting to see this humanistic avatar that can express from hurt, from the struggles of life, and
Yeah,
that's what it's missing because that's what makes us human, though, right?
that's a really good point. Yeah, even if you could upload your entire brain and everything you've recorded, you know, there's this emotional level. I mean, people say you have a second brain in your gut, right? And that you're constantly reacting emotionally to the world, and that's spontaneous. It's like you can't plan that. It's based on all your previous experiences. But yeah, so that's a good question. Like, could you could you teach a computer all your trauma and how to respond spontaneously out of it based on inputs? And I don't know if you
Yeah.
ever could. It seems way too complicated to me, but.
Yeah, because what it's doing now, it's just basically you're giving it instructions. It can create anything, right? AI can create anything, but it's
Yeah,
coming from a set form of instructions, right?
yeah,
So you could, give AI like instructions to really just, replicate your book, right, or illustration work. It will, but there was no meaning behind it. It was just following the
hmm
outside researchers or programmers instructions to do said task,
yeah,
but there was no meaningful want and will and expression.
hmm
It was only I was programmed to do this and it'll do it. But
exactly, yeah,
so that's why argument for it's lacking that human element of life. So I just don't think AI. Well, AI is great at replicating art, but it can't create art. It's like also, how could it, create poetry as well? It's like poetry comes from living life, it's strictly a human characteristic. To be able to express our angst and our experiences and the human struggle and put it into a form um, that we're a unique species that we
yeah,
can do that. So
yeah. It is pretty incredible, and the fact that you could read something written thousands of years ago by someone feeling a very similar thing you've felt, whether love or hate or jealousy, it's the emotion kind of gets encoded into these things, and then as you experience it, read it, hear it, take it in, that emotion explodes in your own mind too. It's an amazing system of communication we have that's on this emotional level that no other species and no computer really could replicate. I agree.
just one last, I guess, one last question. Have you ever really collaborated with your wife on a specific project or like specific book or like poetry and imagery or et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, yeah, we have. We did 2 or maybe it was 3. We did comic strips for the New York Times that were she wrote them and I illustrated them. One was called The Creche, and it was sort of about our at the time I was kind of, believing in God, and it was in these 12 step programs. So Christmas was more important to me then, and she was struggling with, could she buy me a creche as someone who was raised agnostic Jewish, and it was just a really beautiful meditation on our relationship. And then we had another one that was all about our money troubles that we published in the New York Times. And since then we've done 3 or 4 on Medium, the website Medium. One of them was called, my husband made a book about the worst time of our marriage. Here's my version of the story. So it's her responding to Qualification, basically. And cool. Again, she wrote everything, I drew it. And that piece actually has gotten more readers than I think anything I've ever done. There's like 70,000 people who read it or something. Wow. So that took off. But we have a few others up there too. And I love the comic strips we do together. It's just, she's got a totally different voice than mine, and it's fun to try and illustrate it. Yeah.
And now, are your kids artists themselves, or creatively inclined?
Oh yeah, for sure. My daughter, she draws cartoons and illustrations, and she writes, or she doesn't write songs, but she plays songs on the ukulele and piano. My son is also like wildly creative. He's constantly filling up sketchbooks with characters and designs, and he's big into video games, and he's constantly like analyzing the video games. And he's also he also makes like electronic beats and stuff like that. So yeah, they're both super creative.
Cool.
Very proud of them.
And one final question, David. Any advice learned along the road to younger artists or illustrators and musicians or creatives that want to just pursue their creative self?
I would say, don't let anyone tell you not to do it. That's probably the biggest one. But it's also like, be really careful who you share your work with. I heard someone tell me once, like, be careful who you share your gold with. And I think of my gold as like the most precious, vulnerable parts of myself. A lot of times I think of artwork and your creative soul as like a little candle that's very easy to blow out, and you have to kind of guard it and only share it with people you trust at first. Because a lot of times people's response to art is jealousy. They want to shut it down, they want to crush it, and just don't let them do that. Share it with the people who are going to be warm and appreciative, and then build an audience slowly from there out of genuine connection with other people.
Yeah, great advice. And David, I'll let you go from on that point. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And
thanks, Robert. Me too. Yeah, this is
definitely
great.
Will push out the new album on my social or when it comes out, and spread the word organically. Excellent. And definitely looking to. I think you have a sale on your new book, and actually both your books. Definitely 2 sales right there on my part. So.
Oh man, that's really nice. Okay, cool.
Take care, man. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too. Okay,
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.